What's a sign that someone is much smarter than they let on? They're good problem solvers and are always asking questions. In HS, a friend asked in science class, "Can we make rocks?" And he was made fun of for years. It still comes up. Took me a while, but then I thought, can we make rocks? Like it's a legit question. We can make smaller rocks from bigger rocks, and bigger rocks from smaller rocks. But can we make rocks from not rocks? Yes. We use synthetic molten rock, lava, to help chemically clean 1600 degrees Celsius molten steel and make the steelmaking process more efficient, mainly from an energy use perspective. Also, getting the composition of the synthetic lava right is important, because if we have the composition correct, the lava helps protect the heat-proof lining of the furnace. If it's not correct, it can effectively dissolve the lining really quickly. Of course, when the lava cools down, it looks like rock, and it's often used in road base. The more technical explanation: steelmaking. Slag, the synthetic lava, usually has a composition of about 30% calcium oxide, quicklime 25% iron oxide, 15% silica, 5% alumina and 10% magnesium oxide, magnesite. We deliberately introduce the quicklime and magnesite into the furnace to tie up the silica and alumina which comes out of the melting scrap charge, otherwise the silica would dissolve the high magnesite bricks which line the furnace. Slag that's high in quicklime also helps to remove deleterious phosphorus and sulfur from the steel. The slag is also usually full of gas bubbles, think of a molten pumice stone, and anything that's got a lot of air or gas interspersed in it is usually a good insulator, like a down quilt, although physically the slag looks like cake batter that's blowing white hot. My middle and high school teachers hated that I was always asking questions. I wasn't smart, just dumb. It takes emotional intelligence to reach out and ask for help, and intellectual rigor to identify a gap in your knowledge. Anyway, innate curiosity is less common than you'd think. Be proud of it. Someone who admits they're not smart and is willing to better themselves by asking questions really does set themselves above and beyond most folks I've interacted with. If you don't throw your hands up and go, "I'm just bad with X," or something similar, congratulations, you're probably a smarter person than you realize. If I can hand you a stack of paper and ask you to refill a printer and you don't gawk at me with your mouth open, I'd put you in the upper 10% of people I've interacted with in 20 years. If you ask me then retain it or write it down and never ask me again, I'd buy you lunch. I'll also readily admit I block lots of people on Reddit who have absolutely no social tact when they try to correct you. I can be wrong, but don't come out of the gate telling me I'm a fucking moron, thanks. Half of the people on my block list got their account banned, which makes it all the funnier when I clean it up or doomscroll to see if they're still being jackasses. Bart Simpson. Bart Simpson. Bart Simpson. Bart Simpson, will you stop raising your hand? You haven't had the right answer all day. Hey, maybe, maybe not. It can go either way. For example, my brother's an intelligent guy who's always asking questions because he likes learning how things work. Crazy part is he doesn't think he's that smart. On the other hand, most dumb people overestimate their intelligence. Hell, 90% think they're geniuses. Just something to think about. I used to know a guy that was very smart, and whenever he said, "I could be wrong, but," you know he was 100% positive and 100% correct. Ironic how the people who are adamant that they're correct are usually the ones who are incorrect. It's mainly because they know that nothing is as certain and except that they may lack knowledge. This is probably from extensive positive failures they've had. If only you'd said, "I could be wrong, but," first. It's 'cause people hate people who are right all the time. They cannot tell the difference between someone who thinks they're always right and someone who simply doesn't speak up unless they're right. You become a massive target for people with unresolved insecurities and daddy issues. I haven't calibrated the proper brown nose criticism ratio, but self-deprecation is a survival mechanism. I had a STEM professor who I knew encouraged participation and didn't care if you were wrong, so I'd throw out wild ideas with no apologies, knowing that right or wrong, I was helping progress the lecture. I've never said so many speculatively stupid answers in all my life, but I knew that my professor had no ego about it, so I didn't need to, either. But in the rest of life where I have to be careful about my relationships, I'm far more guarded. If you're in a place in life where intelligence is truly valued, you're lucky. In most places, being openly smart is dangerous. The way academics is set up, you build reputation by pointing out flaws in other people's research before putting your own neck out there as other people try to point out your flaws. As a result, professors will qualify everything with, according to XYZ results, or, if this is true then X must would be the case, or, this suggests that. When your job relies on you not looking like a moron, you take care with how you present your information. This is also just the type of language you're supposed to use when you write academic papers. You can never say, right, this proves that, because no one study really proves anything. That's why you're supposed to use words like suggest or supports. It's true, it's kind of like a transformed version of language, where you use a different set of primitives to communicate with than people use on the street. However, once you're accustomed to that kind of language, and get good at using it, it's a really powerful and flexible way to think and communicate. It may initially be motivated by ass covering, but it would be a great disservice if we thought that's all it was. True honest intellectual debate, trying to seek the truth, genuinely and earnestly by both parties, is intimately familiar with and forthcoming about the faults, biases, gaps, statistical confidences etc. of one's own position. Online, debate culture sees debate as a game or a sport, an arena to win, where weakness is to be hidden, obfuscated, and distracted from in order to appear in the intellectually stronger position to an audience who is not familiar enough with the subject to even be qualified to make that determination in the first place. It's certainly much more valuable than ass covering. It's vital to actually discovering truths about how things work and why. I use the phrase, show your math, so much with my younger SYS Angus. I know what the answer is and you got the right answer as well, but show your math. After a while they learn that I don't actually care if they got the answer right. I care how they used the information they had to get to the answer they got. So much of the professional world is problem solving. Most of the time you're not expected to know the answer so much as know how to get the answer. Effective and sound troubleshooting is much more important than knowing the answer all the time. I also find that I put qualifiers on basically everything I write in an email. Per my understanding, according to my last information, it's just better to leave room for people to offer corrections if they need to be made than to come off like you are a know-it-all. Always say that or, from my perspective, or something like that, because I don't want to make it seem like my opinion is fact and there's no possibility of others having differing but valid viewpoints or of me not having all the information. I can never be 100% sure I'm right about anything, even if I read an article on it, so I really struggle to omit softeners like, from what I know, from my essays. It feels disingenuous and inaccurate to phrase my view on things as objective fact rather than saying it how it is, my personal perspective of the matter. Even if it's a well-backed perspective and I have evidence, that doesn't negate the possibility of different perspectives or additional factors that I might not have known about taken into account. I also struggle not to fence sit in my essays because it feels like if I only give one side of the story without acknowledging the opposing viewpoint, I'm not giving my readers all the information, and it feels disingenuous and unfair. The ability to explain complex things in simple terms. They don't seem to care about being perceived as smart. Not embarrassed to admit they don't understand something. I find the more unnecessary jargon someone uses, the more they want to appear smart. It's more indicative of conceit than intelligence. They may be the smartest person in the room or as dumb as rocks. People can be good with words, but dumb in other areas. Like, it's possible to imagine a famous author might seem kind of dumb in an operating room. I think actually being good with words is only indicative of being well read. But I definitely always clock it when someone is trying to flex a $10 word when they could easily use a $1 word to express what they're saying. On the other hand, if you can use a big word properly and organically, that's when I give someone silent props in my head. I agree with most of the replies here, but I'll add my 2 cents. I think people who meet you on your wavelength are smarter than most. They can talk about pretty much anything, with anyone. They'll shoot the shit with some people, discuss politics with others, listen as well as talk, ask questions, but also will take time to explain things if they're asked. The ability to explain advanced topics in a simple way to where a person who doesn't understand it will get at least a rudimentary comprehension of it. Understanding that there are many things they don't understand and so won't be shy about asking questions or saying upfront they don't know something. Listening more than they speak. Not being particularly interested in if people think they're smart or not. Those are generally the 4 most obvious tells emo. I really value the first quality in a person. I think it's a pretty good marker of intelligence to hit the balance of not showing off everything you know and confusing people, but not patronizing them by dumbing things down to an offensive level either. A quick, sly, witty response to a current point of conversation or action that is in reference to something that you thought went over their head 2 hours ago. Family friend married a man like that. I thought he was a dopey at first, lovable as hell and the sweetest guy, but dopey. Dear God, I was wrong. He might quietly be the smartest person in any room he's in. It takes a genius to know when not to talk and when to roast you alive with a single sentence. Listen to them explain something complex to a child. When you're smart, you can make things easy. The smartest people I know have the simplest way of talking because they know what they are talking about and want everyone to understand. They play the part other people think they should. Knew a dude in the military who I thought was legitimately dumb as a rock until I hung out with him and had a conversation. Told me he just played the stupid private part to get out of any bullshit. Yup, served with that guy too. He was slow, walked with a weird gait, would always feverishly shake his head with, "Oh, yeah, I got it. When you had to explain something twice to him. Could barely pass his PRT. Had to have the sergeant be his roommate because of he guy's fridge was just ice cream. Sarge said he overheard a phone call to his folks using words he'd never heard before. Guy had everyone played this whole time. Basically lower the expectations and nothing is expected of you." Not the same thing, but I taught an elective at a high school where there was an autistic kid that was practically nonverbal. He was a nice kid but really big and he looked dumb, and he mostly grunted and laughed and only said a few words here and there. I gave all the kids a long form test and that kid wrote better than every single kid in the class. His vocabulary was far better than all of his peers. I was a new teacher and it completely changed the way I interact with students forever. I was always respectful and spoke to all of my students with respect, but now I never assume what is going on in a kid's mind. People can look like the lights are out, but have a very complex, intelligent world going on inside. I have ADHD with very possible undiagnosed ASD. I have some selective mutism, where if a stimulus hits wrong, I just can't talk to save my life. If you're talking to me while I can clearly hear someone else's conversation, I cannot follow or reply. Writing is just different. I could have a migraine, I could have not slept, I could be in the middle seat on the loudest Southwest flight. There is no amount of dysregulation where I lose my ability to write. I'm sure you made that kid feel very kudos to you for going beyond the first impression. Yeah. Having a sort of unusual issue that impacts one's ability to communicate can be incredibly frustrating. Mine is so mild and no one really knows about it or they barely notice it. I can't imagine how hard it is for some folks to go through life having people assume they are dumb because they struggle to verbalize their thoughts when they are actually bright and quite with it. Also, I know what you mean about writing. I've had a few people accuse me of plagiarism in my lifetime because they don't realize I'm a darn good writer when I put in the effort. I had a small diffuse dry stroke a few years ago and it made speaking very difficult. I can't describe it exactly, but thinking in words stopped being automatic. I had to manually plan words in order and think of each word while saying it to get it out, while also listening to other people, and it was daunting. If I was at all anxious, everything went out the window and I was struggling to get words out at all. During that time I had so many people aggressively insult my intelligence to my face, including doctors whom I was seeing because of the suspected stroke. My favorite person has selective mutism and is also the smartest person I have ever met. Language processing stuff is absolutely wild, and so few people realize it is completely disconnected from intelligence.